Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We appreciate you being here this morning to commemorate the 49th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. This is the Roe at 49 Beyond the Status Quo program between legislators and advocates in the reproductive justice movement. I appreciate you being here and thank all of the sponsors and partners that are participating in this. I'm Gloria Moore. I'm the CEO of March on Georgia. And March on Georgia is an organization that's dedicated to electing women in offices up and down the ballot, also amplifying women's voices and protecting women's rights. And I'm a co-leader of this particular event with Rula Abisamra, who you'll meet in just a moment, who is with Amplify. And you'll meet a lot of interesting people today. And I'd like to do a couple things before we actually hear from all of our wonderful speakers. I'd like to tell you about the agenda and then introduce you to the 4 legislators that we've invited. We're going to have a lot of information given to us today. And we're going to have an opportunity to talk about it in a roundtable discussion, which would, as you all know, work so much better if we were face-to-face in person. But COVID's not letting us do that. We need to make sure everybody's safe. We would have loved to have had a rally and all kinds of candlelight vigil and all kinds of other things this day. But this is going to be an important meeting today. So be prepared to listen, but also be prepared to participate. And once we've heard from the speakers, both the legislators and the advocates, the folks actually involved in delivering reproductive rights and practices to the communities across Georgia, we'll have the roundtable discussion. And then we'll ask you to take a break for about 30 minutes and join us again at noon for a very special informal discussion with Robin Marty. Robin, you'll meet also as one of our speakers, and she is the author of the new handbook for a post-Roe America. That tells you something, right? So I just want to let you know who the legislators are who are with us today, and they are here because they've been involved in the struggle. These are people that, men and women who have not only just supported women's rights in Georgia and reproductive rights for everyone, they have also been active in defending us and protecting us. So our first legislative speaker is going to be Senator Jen Jordan. Jen, would you raise your hand?
Hey, thank you so much.
And our second speaker is going to be Representative Eric Allen. I'm sorry. Yes, Eric Allen.
Good morning.
Good morning. And then Representative Shelley Hutchinson. Shelley?
Good morning.
Good morning. And Representative Rebecca Mitchell.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to pass the program over to my co-leader, if you will, co-organizer, Rula Abisamra with Amplify.
Hey everybody, I hope you can hear me great. I'm happy to be here today. We designed this program as initially with a roundtable approach, and some of us remember when you crowded into a room at the Capitol and hoped that you could see everybody and made as much as you could of the time that there was. So we'll do that today virtually. And I'm going to introduce a number of advocates, researchers, and healthcare providers, all from here in Georgia, who are actively part of the work that we do. And before I do that, I just want to highlight that we're here to talk about Roe versus Wade at 49 years old. But more than that, it's because this is the anniversary of that decision, and we don't know if there will be a 50th birthday for the decision. What we do know is that there are other avenues for policymaking and for change, for defending, and not just defending, but expanding abortion rights and abortion access for Georgians. And so that's why this is actually about going beyond the status quo. So our speakers today are Oriaku Njaku, the Executive Director of Access Reproductive Care Southeast, Kwajalein Jackson, the Executive Director of the Feminist Women's Health Center, Dr. Sarah Redd of the Center for Reproductive Health Research in the Southeast, or RISE, at Emory University's School of Public Health, Reverend Billy Honor, the Organizing Director at the New Georgia Project. And you already heard that Robin Marty is also one of our panelists. So those are our panelists. And then after that, we will proceed into a roundtable, at which point I'll also introduce our additional discussants who are joining the roundtable. So thanks everybody for being here. And I also want to note, well, I think we'll say more as we go on, but if you hear the trash behind me, it's trash day, and that'll stop soon. Back to you, Gloria.
Yes, sometimes we can do these Zoom meetings without any interruptions, no technical issues. So everyone just keep your fingers crossed. And I'm gonna just go ahead and get us started with our first speaker. As I identified, Senator Jen Jordan has been involved with us protecting our rights in Georgia for quite a while. So I'm just gonna ask Senator Jordan, would you say a few words to us?
Yeah, thank you. I would like for this to be a celebration, right? That Roe has been around for 49 years, and normally we would celebrate it. We would say, we've fought the fight, we've held the line, and we've made it another year. But I think we all know that what we are in the very near future, what the Supreme Court is basically telling us in terms of a lot of their rulings is that Roe will no longer be after they decide the Mississippi decision. I think they've been very clear in terms of how they've treated the cases out of Texas with respect to SB 8 and how they absolutely refuse to stop that law, effectively nullifying guaranteed constitutional rights of Texas women. But I think we know in Georgia that there is a larger message that then is sent, right, to legislators here that, hey, if you pass this kind of law, then, you too can strip women of their constitutional rights and not have to worry about judicial review. It is a very serious time, and I think it's, I'm glad we're here to talk about it because I think that we've got a lot to do. I think we need to fight like hell, obviously, to protect what we have, but we also have to be clear-eyed in terms of the challenges that are ahead, and really try to come up with the strategy kind of for what happens after Roe. How do we approach it? And we've got to be fighting on all fronts. It has to be on the ground. It has to be political. It has to be PR and messaging. And a lot of it has to be about information to young women too. When we were fighting over 481, Georgia's abortion ban, I remember a mom came up to me after the fight became very public and ugly, and her high school daughter basically requested that she be taken to the doctor to get birth control because she was very concerned about her ability to make choices about her body in the future. And so it's those kind of conversations that we're going to have to start having more often, because I think what we know is that our daughters are not going to have access to the type of care that we've been able to have in the past. So I just really appreciate being here, among incredible people who are fighting the fight every day, and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. I really appreciate your comments, and we appreciate your continued involvement. I'm going to ask Representative Shelley Hutchinson to speak next. And again, invited to participate because she's been involved and supportive in protecting women's rights in Georgia. Shelley?
Thanks, Gloria. I really think that my political career started with 481. I was a freshman at the time. I was on Health and Human Services, and I remember when I was elected, I came in with a huge class of freshman Democrats, and it was just like throwing you in the deep end of the pool with no experience. And I remember sitting in the committee hearing, still not thinking this was going to go any further than this, because when we were elected and we had so many flip seats, they're like, there's no way they're going to touch abortion. The numbers are too close. And and the speaker would never call an abortion bill. So I was sitting in the committee hearing like, what's going on right now? And I remember Billy Mitchell sitting right next to me, and he said, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe, and he said it out loud. He said, I can't believe we're doing this. And I was just stunned when it passed that first committee. That was the first committee that 481 was heard in. So everything after that was just stress and fight and nastiness. And I mean, and even if you went to all committee hearings in the House and the Senate, we had 2 in the House, we had 1 in the Senate, and all the people that testified were just amazing. Everyone brought you to tears. And the people who were testifying on our side, we had more in number, our stories and the science and everything behind why this was an awful bill. We had more of that evidence and testimony than they did of the foolishness that went in behind 481. And again, I was like, there's just no way this is gonna pass. There's no way. And I remember being in the Capitol. It was after midnight, and it passed. And all the protesters, like the handmaids, all the bright red cloaks that everyone was wearing. It was so stunning and so moving. And I know a lot of us stayed late just crying. It was just, that really taught me so many lessons about what this job really is. You can have science and common sense and passion, and it still didn't matter. The bottom line was it still didn't matter. And I have taken that experience with me in every other political situation. It totally changed how I saw the legislature, how I saw my colleagues. It was just such a moving, for me personally and for everybody there, for the whole state, to be honest. I remember I was interviewed the next day, and they said, how do you feel? I said, I feel like I've just been raped by a law. And they said, really? I said, yeah, I really, really do. I mean, everything that's behind rape, power, emotion, control, that was what everything behind this rule, everything behind this law was about power, control. It felt like a rape by law. I've heard that they're going to try to mimic or even copy what they did in Texas this year. I'm hoping that's not the case. I haven't heard any more scuttlebutt about that, but definitely on the lookout, because this is beyond important. So that's my experience. Just 481 was enough for me to just be broken underneath this. Whenever we talk about the subject, or whenever we do any work around this subject, I'm still a little broken, a lot broken, but we're still gonna fight whatever comes in that touches our right to control our body. So that's where we are at the legislature right now, in my experience. So I don't even know what to say after that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. everybody in this space understands what you're saying. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to ask Representative Eric Allen to make some comments for us as well. He has also been involved in supporting and working with us to protect women's reproductive rights in Georgia. Eric.
Thank you very much, Gloria, and good morning to everyone. It's good to be here. And, on this 49th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and Senator Jordan said it best, we should be celebrating, the anniversary, but as we know, this is a right that is under assault, just like our broader democracy. I'm always honored to be included as an ally, and especially to hear from some of my most passionate colleagues. Me and Representative Hutchinson came in the same class, the large class affectionately known as D17. And 481 was a wake-up call for our entire class of not only seeing, what we had run on, but also what the majority was willing to do to exert what she talked about with that power, that control, that the things that they really wanted. So I'm always happy to step up when called, as I said, as an ally and lend my voice to such an important issue. It almost feels like our colleagues on the other side in both the House and the Senate are, in a very liberty defending mood. Whether it be false flags about personal liberty with mask mandates or their personal liberties with vaccines and school curricula, and I could go on and on. But we know that stops when it comes to a woman's liberty and her right to choose how and when she starts a family. And although the governor said I believe it was a State of the State or an interview close by, that he doesn't want to see any legislation on this issue this session, I'm personally afraid that his urge for primary red meat will overtake his previous statement. And so I would not be surprised, as both have said, if we were to see some type of legislation introduced and moving that mirrors SB 8 from Texas. Nor would I be surprised if we see a reprisal of Representative Lott's trigger bill that she introduced right at 481. I think with the Roe cases, the cases moving to the Supreme Court that could have an impact on Roe, I fear that it just makes sense to them to have the trigger bill ready so that if the case ends the way they hope, it would automatically have a devastating impact on Georgia families, and most importantly, women in Georgia. So I think those are things to really be watching out for. And as I said, I make no mistake about my position of where I am as an ally and as a father, a husband, a brother, a friend. I will always be here to step up and step in where needed. Going backwards to me is not an option. If we limit access and healthcare is restricted, it only becomes more dangerous for those seeking it and will have tremendous inequitable outcomes for marginalized communities. So this is important. And I once again, thank you guys for having me. I look forward to the conversation today and beyond. And as always, when needed, please call and I'll be right there beside you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And one of the things you said about going backwards is absolutely a reason why we're having this program today, and why it's named Beyond Roe, beyond the status quo, because you're going to hear from a lot of other speakers saying if we even kept what we have, it is not enough. So we're happy to hear that you're going to stay with us as we move forward, not backwards. I'd like to introduce Representative Rebecca Mitchell. Again, like the other legislative speakers you've heard from, she has been with us from the beginning and stayed very true to helping us protect our rights. Rebecca?
Thank you for the introduction. And it's really powerful to follow speakers who were on the other side of the barrier during that fight. I was outside the State House for 481 because I was not yet elected. And on the outside, it felt so powerless to watch. And on the inside, you also hear how powerless it felt to see rights being taken away. And I think when I look at what we're doing now, I am very concerned about what bills are coming. I'm also looking at what bills are advancing now that potentially can support folks in Georgia, even in this moment. And I think we are seeing a movement in the Democratic caucus to push forward bills that are helpful in a larger space than we're protecting rights. We're also asking for supports for the reproductive justice framework that is being driven by the work of people like all the panelists in this group here. And things I am hopeful to see advancing this year, looking at bills like Representative Cannon's bill to support doula reimbursements, bills that ask questions about earned income tax credit, reimbursable earned income tax credits, which sound really esoteric, but in a data analytic framework, you see the impact they have on families, supporting families with young children, and specifically supporting Black and Brown families. So we need to look at the whole space of bills that we're putting forward and see what protections we can offer, even while pushing back as hard as we can against bad bills that come through. And I think, I know this panel is aware, but I don't know how much the audience is aware. There's a resolution coming forward to the floor this week affirming our commitment to reproductive justice as a group of people. And I ran for State House because this issue was so fundamentally important. And I am really inspired by all the folks who have looked at the space of reproductive justice and said, what voices am I hearing? What asks are the community making of us as legislators, and what bills can we put forward? I know in my particular framework, I really look through the lens of public health measures, and having lots of conversations about the impact of folks who are targeting vaccine requirements, and looking at how that will differentially impact Georgians. So there's a very large space here that we need to all push forward in to make sure that we're putting forward as much good legislation as we can while continuing to push back against the damaging legislation. And obviously one of the fundamental tenets of that is we need to expand Medicaid, right? And we see that impact will be universal in helping all families who are trying to make sure that they can access care. And I heard one of the things that was mirrored in all the speakers is we're seeing Roe being taken away now, but we have systematically seen Roe being eroded. And so abortion access, we view it as I think it can be viewed as a binary, either it's there or it's not, but that's not really what's happened, right? Abortion access wasn't the same for everyone and has continued to be harder and differentially harder over the past years of multiple lawsuits. So we really need to be mindful that this is a final blow, but the blows have been coming the entire time, and the fight needs to happen against each of those blows. And this is I felt really intimidated to have to offer thoughts to this group, because you are the people who have been feeling each blow and have been fighting back against each blow. But I am so grateful to be here and to listen to you all speak, and to hear more things that we should be working on to make sure that we are addressing the needs that are out there and that are being voiced. So thank you so much for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here, and I'd like to thank all of the legislators for joining us today. We hope that you will stay for the panel discussion, because we'd love to hear some more comments and also talk to you about some ways to move forward. And that's about what we're going to hear now. We're going to talk about what is going on today and some ideas about moving forward. So I'm going to turn the program back over to Rula and move on from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. There's a lot I would love to say. I will turn it over to our advocates, our researchers, our healthcare providers, and you're going to hear us talk in very gender inclusive language. It's important to us to note that we've got women who have abortions. We've also got non-binary people who have abortions, and we've got trans men who have abortions all in our community. And so when we talk about the barriers to abortion, those actually, although they were based on gender discrimination and misogyny, they do not discriminate in terms of who they impact. When we're talking about, I'm pregnant, I need an abortion. And we are about to talk about where the impact is disproportionate. And so I'm really glad that Representative Mitchell brought up data and brought up the intersectional framework that we're talking about, in terms of the issues that impact us all and impact our reproductive freedoms and our reproductive outcomes, that we have a chance to do policymaking around. Those are myriad. And we're also going to talk about the other side, the way that abortion restrictions and lack of reproductive health care access impact us in intersectional and myriad ways that even go beyond what you think might be the reproductive outcomes and impacts. There's so many different places we could pivot to in terms of what all these speakers' expertise is, but I think we're going to pass it over first to Dr. Sarah Redd from the RISE Center at Rollins School of Public Health, Emory University, to talk about some of the research that you all have done at RISE, as well as the data and the evidence base that exists being contributed from other researchers in the field. And you have some slides, right?
Do. Yes.
Okay. You should be allowed to screen share. Go ahead and try.
It says it's disabled.
All righty. I'm just going to hold off 1 second then, and I will share the slides if that's okay.
Totally.
Okay. Aha. Oh, I can give you the permissions to do it, I think. Okay. Can you try now?
Yes, it is
Okay.
working. Awesome. Good morning, y'all. Thank you, Rula, for that introduction. And my name is Sarah Redd, and I am a researcher with RISE at Emory University. But more importantly, I'm a Georgia native. I was born and raised here, and so I'm, deeply invested in everything that we're talking about today. I am just so honored and grateful to be in this space with you all today and be contributing to this conversation with so many incredible, just stellar folks. And for my part, as Rula mentioned, I'm going to be giving y'all kind of like a quick and dirty snapshot of the evidence base around restrictive abortion policies, both in Georgia and in the US overall. So to start, let's just kind of get a little bit of the landscape around abortion in Georgia. 95% of counties in the state do not have a clinic that provides abortion services. And on top of that, and partially because, or causing that, is that Georgia has many, many abortion restrictions in effect in the state. This includes things like biased counseling that patients have to receive before they get an abortion, a 24-hour waiting period, a parental notification law for minors, and a 22-week gestational age limit on abortions, which is the only one that's in effect right now. So what we know from both the lived experiences of people seeking abortion care and from the literature is that restrictive abortion policies do three main things. First, they severely reduce access to abortion care, mainly through decreasing provider availability and decreasing providers' ability to provide care, for making it harder for patients to access or actually even make an appointment, and increasing travel time, travel distance, and costs of getting care. Second, they also both directly and indirectly increase the risk for adverse health outcomes. And that includes outcomes like maternal mortality, like low birth weight, mental health issues, intimate partner violence, and economic hardship. And three, these policies are they function as tools of white supremacy, and they are clear examples of structural racism and classism. And because of this, they disproportionately affect and devalue the health and well-being of Black people and people with lower socioeconomic statuses. And we can actually see the evidence of points 1 and 3 when you look at some work that we did at RISE around Georgia's 22-week gestational age limit. So Georgia's 22-week ban limits abortion beyond 22 weeks gestation from the last menstrual period. The policy was passed in 2012, but following a period of litigation, was fully implemented in 2015. So for today's purpose, we're going to focus on that black line at the top where there's that little yellow arrow, which represents the number of abortions at or after 22 weeks gestation occurring in Georgia. So with full implementation of the policy in 2015, which is on this kind of the right-hand side of the figure, we saw that the number of abortions at or after 22 weeks gestation declined to virtually 0, indicating that this law eliminated access to abortion at or after 22 weeks. But when we look at this kind of overall picture, we don't actually see how this policy affected different Georgians differently, and how abortion is affected by racism. So in a follow-up study to the first study, we examined racial and ethnic inequities in the effects of the 22-week ban on abortion in Georgia. So for this slide, we're going to focus on both the black line and the red line, which show the abortion rates of abortions at or after 22 weeks for Black people and white people in Georgia, respectively. So when you compare those two lines, you can see that the decline in the abortion rate at 22 weeks or greater caused by this ban is much steeper for Black people than white people, which provides clear evidence that the 22-week ban disproportionately affects the affects the access to abortion for Black pregnant people, which then increases the risk of the adverse outcomes that we talked about earlier, like maternal mortality, which we know is already a huge issue in this state. I want to just wrap it up with a little bit of a high note, that it's not, at least in the research, it's not all terrible all the time. A very recent study from researchers at Georgia State found that legalization of abortion in the 1960s and 70s led to a 30 to 40% decline in maternal mortality rates in communities of color. So looking at all of this together, again, this is just like a really quick snapshot. The evidence clearly shows that restrictive abortion policies negatively affect the health and well-being of all Georgians, but particularly Black Georgians and other Georgians of color, and showcase the importance of maintaining legal access to abortion in our state. I put this together with my colleague, Dr. Subhan Rasimhan, who's going to join us later, but we, of course, are always available for any questions, comments, and we have also a lot of resources that we can share as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much. And before we move on, Dr. Red, I think I heard you say, but I think I maybe misheard. You said this is the only law that's currently in effect. But as we know, there's a number of abortion restrictions in effect. So I wanted to rewind that.
I meant that's the only gestational age limit that's in effect. We know there was HB 481, the 6-week ban, but that is currently enjoined. So it is not in effect. So my apologies for misspeaking. That is the only gestational age limit that's in effect.
Got you. That does make a lot of sense. Thank you. Okay, so two things I want to do. First of all, I want to note that among our panelists, because we have Oryaku Njaku here with us, who as executive director of ARC Southeast was a co-author on one of the recent RISE papers, the one publishing data from 10,000 callers that were supported by ARC. So not to put you on the spot, Oryaku, I will give you for a few minutes, but we'll go to Kwajalein first, and then I'd love for you to just mention what was surprising and what was not surprising about participating in that study, or about the data that came out from it. So not to throw you off your prepared remarks if you had some. Next, though, we're going to go to someone in our community who is also very familiar with the numerous abortion restrictions that are in effect. Kwajalein Jackson is the executive director of Feminist Women's Health Center, which is an abortion care provider, a gynecological care provider, and a community education and advocacy organization as well in our community. Has really been a pillar of this movement for quite some time. Kwajalein, would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Rula. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to all the speakers who've preceded me in the program. I certainly understand why today doesn't feel celebratory, and I'm not here to diminish the very real uncertainty and fear and sadness that surround what we're facing. But I'm also not about to let some dusty justices take away my joy this morning. So that may be clear in the remarks that I'm here to share. Again, my name is Kwajalein Jackson, and I serve as the executive director at Feminist Women's Health Center. We have been providing compassionate abortion care in Georgia since 1976, just a few short years after the historic Roe versus Wade decision was made. And in that time, we have seen the near constant erosion of abortion access across the country. Numerous unconstitutional laws challenged and litigated in the courts. And just this past year in 2021, a record number of new anti-abortion bills passed across the United States. And as urgent and frightening and as imminent as the threat to abortion care feels right now, today on what might be the last anniversary of Roe, we know that this has been steadily building over decades, harming our communities in Georgia and across the country. Unfortunately, we are not new to this. Abortion bans and restrictions are designed to harm poor people and fall hardest on Black and Indigenous and other people of color, on queer and trans people, on young people, the very communities that we see in the clinic every day. Anti-abortion politicians at the state level have been relentlessly working to deny us our freedoms and create more obstacles that stand between us and control over our health, our bodies, our families, and our destinies. We've been working, testifying, marching, and screaming at the top of our lungs for such a long time to try to stop it. But we're here now, and we are watching our already fragile human rights continue to crumble before us. But what I am here to tell you is that Feminist Women's Health Center and the deeply connected reproductive health rights and justice movement in Georgia remain undeterred, undaunted, and unrelenting in our fight to defend our dignity. We know that access to abortion care is not just about what happens in the courts. It is about our humanity, our liberation, and our futures. Our vision for freedom has to be bigger than the constraints of the courts that were never built for us. We see time and time again that these systems will continue to care for the people who designed them to benefit themselves. So we have to design our own systems. We will do what it takes to make sure that people can get the compassionate abortion care that they need, can grow and raise their families in safety, and live in thriving and resourced communities. We are building a future where people can get abortions when they need them without shame or stigma or delay or apology, where our decisions are met with honor and love and respect. We're not new to this. We are in this for the long term, and we will not back down, and we're ready to win. But what it will take to get all of us into this future is everyone working together. what happens in Congress or at the Supreme Court or even at the state capitol are not the only things that determine what happens in Georgia. As champions of reproductive freedom, we have an opportunity to draw a line in the sand that says, in spite of SCOTUS, regardless of Roe, not only will we not take a single step back, but that we are actually poised to be a vanguard in the Southeast that moves reproductive justice forward for generations to come. That we are willing to take big swings and celebrate small victories. That we will leave no one behind. That we will not grow weary in well-doing, and that we will absolutely outlive the fall of Roe to see our communities thrive. So if you are new to this, the time to dig in and get connected is right now. It's not the time to accept defeat in spite of how things feel. We are not hopeless. We are not powerless. Now is the time to volunteer with reproductive health rights and justice organizations, to speak out at the state capitol, to fund abortions, to organize in your community, to tell your abortion story, to run for office, to stand 10 toes down for abortion care in Georgia, and create a future where we can all be free. Thank you.
Kwajalein, thank you. It's not often that when you're a panelist, you get applause in the little boxes across the Zoom screen, but I think all of us really are feeling what you are saying. And I'm feeling all my 10 toes, to be honest. Like quite literally. We are going to pass it over to Oriaku, and I think this is a great opportunity too to highlight something that Kwajalein said in what does it mean to fund abortion? Who can do that? What does that look like? So Oriaku Njaku, co-founder and executive director of Access Reproductive Care Southeast, Georgia's only abortion fund and a regional abortion fund that serves 6 states in the Southeast. And I'm going to let you say what else you want to say about this remarkable organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Rula. Before I actually get started, I know there's folks, we've said reproductive justice a lot. So wanted to let folks know what the definition of reproductive justice. So Sister Song defines reproductive justice as the human right to maintain bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children that we have in safe and sustainable communities. And so the 12 Black women who started reproductive justice did this in a response to the reproductive rights movement, where it was saying you can either be a parent or not be a parent. The reality is that in communities of color and Black communities, the choices that we make aren't just on a binary. The choices that we make are based on race and gender and your economic status. There's so many things that impact the decisions that we make that it can't just be focused on a single issue. So Access Reproductive Care Southeast is a regional reproductive justice organization based in Atlanta, Georgia, that works at the intersection of reproductive justice and abortion access in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee. What makes ARC Southeast so special as an abortion fund doing reproductive justice work is our fundamental commitment that we all have to embodying and operationalizing our vision and values every single day. And honestly, to be part of an organization that is striving to contribute constructively to creating a more just society that truly reflects and represents the various communities that we are part of is something that we definitely do not take for granted. So ARC Southeast has worked really hard to eliminate barriers to abortion access through direct service delivery and organizing since May 5th of 2015. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, we recognized the need to strengthen our direct service program to meet the increased need of abortion funding and logistical support for people seeking abortions in the Southeast. And as COVID continues to impact communities of color, coupled with the increase in anti-abortion legislation like SB 8 in Texas that are sweeping through the South, we've noticed an increase in abortion seekers outside of our 6-state service area traveling to our region for abortion care. One thing I want to note is in the Emory study that Rula mentioned earlier, that was a snapshot from 2017 through the top of 2020. And that was the 10,000 cases that Rula mentioned. But since 2016, when we actually started funding abortions, we have opened over 25,000 cases for Southerners seeking abortions and needing logistical support in the Southeast. And so logistical support, folks don't think about all of the barriers that come up when accessing an abortion and think it's like, oh, the cost is the only thing. We've already mentioned that 95% of Georgians live in a county without an abortion provider. That's actually the statistic for the entire Southeast region. There's no idea of borders. There's no idea of having an abortion in my state or another state, because the reality is that folks are crossing state lines every single day to access abortions. So some of the barriers end up being lodging, childcare, an escort, someone who's going to be there to support you while you're having an abortion. What are you going to eat when you travel to a state that you've never known? There's so many barriers that would keep folks from having an abortion. And ARC Southeast is deeply committed to eliminating those barriers no matter what. Just a few more stats. So from July 2020 to June 30th, 2021, we made 5,363 pledges for abortion funding, and 4,910 of those were redeemed. And so of those pledges that we made, 1,029 of those folks had to travel outside of state for their abortion. In that time, we've also funded over $7,000, or not $7,000, $700,000 to fund direct abortion services and over $20,000 for logistical support. And another thing to note is that 82% of the folks who call ARC Southeast identify as being Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. And so while the impact of our work has made accessing abortions easier for thousands of Southerners, the reality is that this is only scratching the surface of what is required to fully eliminate barriers to access in the South. So when I'm thinking about this future beyond Roe, I envision us living in a world where your zip code, your age, your documentation status, your income, disability, race, indigeneity, gender, sexuality do not create barriers to accessing an abortion. A world where folks can get all the fully funded abortions they want plus more without having to leave their communities. A world where oppressive laws and systems that tell us how to live are no longer valid because we have been able to create systems where all of us can actually thrive. And this future will be fueled by unconditional, radical, revolutionary love. This idea that, this is the 49th anniversary of Roe and may not happen. I'm not even claiming that, y'all. I'm like, because I know 49 years from now, what I do know is that I'm still not going to be doing the same fight in the same way over and over. That's one thing that I know for sure. And the idea of protecting or codifying Roe will not change the reality that abortions are not accessible for most of us. There is a future beyond Roe that invites us to truly have control over our lives. We know that we can't trust all politicians and all judges to make this future come true. But let me just tell y'all that we are actually in control of our destinies and we are always in choice. ARC Southeast is deeply committed to liberating abortion and making sure that material conditions of people in our communities are being met through the mutual aid of funding abortions and providing logistical support. We will continue to fund abortions, provide logistical support, and build power not only in Georgia, but in the Southeast, regardless of any abortion bans in our state or whatever SCOTUS decides. If you are listening right now and you feel called in this moment to join a movement and liberate abortion, just know that it's awesome to be an ally, but we're also looking for co-conspirators that are willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that we all have everything we need, no matter what. And that's everything we need for our biological families, for our chosen families, and for our found families. But before you make this leap towards joining reproductive justice and making reproductive justice a reality for Georgians, definitely take time to ask yourself this question that we ask ARC Southeast volunteers as well. How far are you willing to go for our collective liberation? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oriaku. You're getting the applause again. One thing that I didn't mention, but was really occurring to me while the legislators were speaking is that, yeah, on our end too, I think everyone or almost everyone, perhaps with the exception of Robin Marty, who was not in Georgia, but everyone on this call was remembers like all too well HB 481. We were there with y'all, regardless of which side of the ropes we were on or whether we were on the steps or inside. It was brutal. And I will say that when I think about I've been thinking about this year and like, wow, are we going to into another year with, is it the same plan? Is it the same, like, we're just going to have to, I won't get into it right now because that's not the topic of what we're doing, but it really resonates with me that we don't want to do a whole year over again of giving them hell that they didn't want to have. We know that they didn't want to get that either. And let's not do that. Let's do something different. Let us move beyond and forward and upward and onward. And so now, let me make sure I have my run of show correct. I'm going to turn it over to the Reverend Billy Honor. I'm so excited to do that. The organizing director of the New Georgia Project, who, if I haven't mentioned before, the Feminist Women's Health Center, ARC Southeast, and the New Georgia Project are all member organizations of Amplify Georgia Collaborative. We'll give our little spiel about the collaborative before we close out. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Billy. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rula. I appreciate it. And greetings, freedoms people. Really good to be with you this morning. I too come in the spirit of celebration like Kwajalein and so many others. Because I think we need to say today that Roe versus Wade, despite all the attacks, I think we need to say it's been a success. We need to celebrate the success of Roe versus Wade because as a result of it, we now living in America right now. And we need to say this where most of the people who are citizens of this country support access to abortion and reproductive health, right? That's a success of Roe versus Wade that has helped to create a country in a context where that can be said. And we need to celebrate that. Not only that, but we live in a Georgia where 70% of people who call themselves Georgians also support access to abortion. And so we need to celebrate Roe versus Wade for the culture and the context for what we live in, where people overwhelmingly support all of the things that we've been talking about. And I am here today as an organizer because I've spent the greatest part of my professional life working and collectively trying to bring together for social change people in the new American majority, people of color, women, young people, so that they can create the type of lives and communities they want to see. If you ask most of them what Roe versus Wade is, they can't give you a in-depth analysis. They can't even tell you what it is, but I can tell you what they will say. They will tell you that they value reproductive health. They do understand the importance of family planning. They do understand the importance of being able to make decisions about their own bodies, right? So the things that Roe versus Wade represents, those values are held in our communities among that new American majority. And I want you to know that when they are talked to, when they are communicated with, when they are helped to understand what's at stake, they will stand up for it. And we must never forget that there'd be more with us than against us on this issue. The New Georgia Project has registered 500,000 people in the state of Georgia to vote over the last 8 years, 500,000. Now we know that just about everybody's registered now. That ain't just us, that's a lot of organizations. So we'll take a bow, right? But we'll take a bow now, and with the last 8 months, we've shifted. Now we want to organize those 500,000 people around a justice agenda, right? Part of that justice agenda is my responsibility to think about how we go out and organize people to see that the type of Georgia that we want to create, yes, it includes environmental justice. Yes, it includes things that have to do with greater access to Medicaid and Medicare. Yes, it has to do with wanting to put forth laws that help us to expand access to the freedoms that keep us from incarcerating people and taking away their voting rights. But also that means, how do we connect those issues to the issues of reproductive health and justice, right? And that reproductive health and justice are a part of this broader justice agenda. And this year, we're going to citizens and saying, listen, this is not an isolated issue. It is a part of the broader community and the way in which we want to govern our lives, the way in which we want to do life together. And so we're excited because we plan on going out there and knocking the doors, having the conversations, going into the mosques, synagogues, and temples, and getting people of faith to say that we also believe, as people of faith, that reproductive justice is a spiritual issue, and not allowing for it simply to be an issue that's talked about by hyper fundamentalist evangelicals. But we're going to say that people in mosques, synagogues, and temples, and wherever it is you worship, if it's a bush or it's even at your kitchen table, right? That you are saying that you believe that access to health and being able to make decisions about your body is a spiritual value. We're going to do all that this year, and I'm looking forward to working with so many of you as we go and do it, because the fight ain't over, it's just getting started.
Thank you so much. We are all here for this. I will turn it over to our final panelist, Robin Marty, who is the author of a really relevant book, The New Handbook for a Post-Roe America. The Handbook for a Post-Roe America came out in 2019, when I know that many of us here were like, yep, that is relevant. And we were being told by a lot of people, don't worry about it, you're good. These bans will fall because they're unconstitutional. Don't even worry about fighting them. We knew that wasn't the case. Robin knew that wasn't the case. And she has also published another book that is called Crow After Roe: How Separate but Equal Has Become the New Standard in Women's Health and What We Can Do About It. And so, Robin, I will let you speak to why we need a handbook and what's in it.
Well, first of all, I want to say that being here today with this group of amazing activists and politicians and everything that everybody has done really means a lot to me. And I cannot be more grateful that you all invited me to come and speak with you today. Also, I want to apologize for the title of that book that you just mentioned. It's really offensive, and it was redone last year and updated, and is now The End of Roe v. Wade. And activists learn and they move on and they admit their mistakes. So let's pretend that that first book didn't happen. But I following Kowaljan and Oriaku and Mr. Honor, this is just a lot, but it actually makes a lot of sense for me. Until a year ago, I was an author. I was a freelance reporter. I was considered a national expert on abortion access, especially in the South, in the Midwest, in states that had restricted bans. I was a person who was supposed to be able to predict what things would look like when clinics start closing, when abortion laws start going into effect, what would and would not end up being put into law and being enacted. And then a year ago, I gave that all up. After we saw what happened in Georgia, after we saw what happened in Alabama, being a reporter was not something I could do anymore. I couldn't stay on the sidelines anymore. And I packed up my family in Minnesota, and in February, I moved down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So now I am down here. I am the operations director for West Alabama Women's Center, which is one of 3 abortion clinics in the state of Alabama, and the abortion clinic that provides about 50% of the care of people who are getting abortions in Alabama. It's been a major change, to say the least, but it has also shown me that what I thought was access, I did not know a thing. And it has changed daily, monthly, over and over, especially ever since Texas's ban went into effect. I can tell you that we've always known when these laws start going into effect that it was a domino that would push people further and further away until people simply could not access care anymore. And I can tell you that just this month in January, We usually see 200 patients a month at our clinic, and we are on track to see over 400 patients this month. Many of them from Mississippi, many of them from Louisiana, many of them from Texas. We are seeing these patients despite the fact that we have a 48-hour to in-person wait. We are seeing these patients because it takes up to 4 weeks to get into any of the clinics that are surrounding Texas. We are seeing these patients who are spending almost as much traveling as they are in actually getting the abortion that they are coming to get. And we are seeing these patients and they are not slowing down, and they will not slow down. And what worries me the most are the patients that we're not seeing, because we know those are there. Having been in Alabama now for almost a year, I have realized that the root of everything is the lack of any sort of health care to begin with. Alabama, like Georgia, has not expanded Medicaid. Alabama, like Georgia, does not have actual clinics that can provide birth control, that can provide preventative care, that can provide preventative care outside of a reproductive health setting. These are the problems that have not been addressed, and these are the problems that we are trying to address as we try to keep abortion accessible, and the state will not let us. The state refuses us as a Medicaid provider. The state refuses to allow places for people to access birth control other than the one county health department in each county. These are the things that we're fighting against. But Georgia is the inspiration. And that is something that I've understood ever since I got here, is Georgia is the beacon that shows us what things can be like and how things can change after years of organizing. It's not a quick fix. It's something that has happened over and over for years, gathering the voters, gathering the people on the ground, building the groundwork, combining the grassroots. And we need to follow that lead, because that is the inspiration that Alabama will follow. That is the inspiration that Mississippi will follow. We know that you were just a few votes away from having a Democratic governor. We know that you have Democratic senators. You are the change, and you are the change that we can replicate. And that's what we're going to do. And that's how we're going to get past when we end up in this post-Roe America.
Robin, thank you so much for closing out our panel. That was really powerful. And thank you to all of our panelists. I am going to introduce the folks who are joining in with these panelists for the roundtable. This will be a little bit more of an open discussion. We are taking questions from the audience, from reporters, as well as some questions that were really just on our organizers' minds. If you have questions and you're watching right now, please use the question and answer. It's a little Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen to submit your questions, and we'll get to them in approximately the order that we got them. Before I do that, let me introduce our roundtable participants who are joining in. Agbo Ikor is the Policy and Advocacy Director at Spark Reproductive Justice Now. Also someone I've organized alongside for years, and we really threw down in 2019. Shanti Moore is a birth worker and a birth work consultant, a birth justice consultant with Sister Song Women of Color for Reproductive Justice Collective. And Dr. Tiffany Hale-Storks. Oh, you're going to laugh, but I forgot to pull up your bio. So I'm going to do that in 1 second. I'm so sorry. Dr. Subhasri Narasimhan, PhD, MPH, also with the RISE Center for Reproductive Health Research in the Southeast at Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University. And Dr. Hale-Storks, I am here to introduce you. Dr. Tiffany Hale-Storks, MD and MPH, I'm glad I checked, is a board certified obstetrician and gynecologist with subspecialty training in family planning, and a commission member for the Reproductive Justice Commission of Atlanta, which is a city body, and a fellow with the Physicians for Reproductive Health organization. Because you're an abortion care provider, as well as many other forms of care that our folks need, we are so glad to have you here. We're glad to have Shanti and Agbo and Dr. Narasimhan with us. So our first question
Arula,
Oh, yes.
I notice Representative Matt Wilson has joined us. Like to welcome him.
Oh my gosh. Hello.
And there may be even some other legislators here.
Yeah.
If
Why
you
don't I
are,
let you name those? You can introduce Rep. Wilson, and I'll just go through and identify if we have any other representatives I need to promote to panelists. I'll do that right now.
yeah, I'm not seeing anyone else who had joined us, but definitely,
Okay.
Matt, if you'd like to participate, we'd love to have you.
Absolutely. So glad to be here.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for doing that. I do see that we had some other representatives also in the audience, but I did not mean to put you on the spot. You can ask to be promoted to panelist if you wish to join in the conversation. All right. Yes, I do see Rep. Williams, Mary Frances Williams, and I also saw Rep. Regina Lewis Ward. So I've given them the invite to join as a panelist, but they may be here for listening. So, Allison, could you start us off with our first question, please?
Yes, I can. So our first question is, how can faith organizations best organize and engage in this work?
I think we're going to turn that one over to Reverend Billy, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. So the first thing I would say is that I would reach out to organizers who are already doing this work, like my good friend Kenyatta Chinwe, who's working with Amplify. She can definitely help you if you're in Georgia and beyond to think through this process. But I would say in general, it starts with making sure that the leaders of these congregations are themselves becoming informed about what is reproductive health and reproductive justice. There are a number of congregations that are becoming reproductive freedom congregations all over the country. A lot of it in reaction to what we've seen in the past couple of years. But part of the first step of that process of becoming a reproductive freedom congregation is having the leadership become educated themselves on a lot of what we've talked about today, and then moving progressively towards a step of a congregation taking a vote of actually being an open and affirming reproductive justice congregation. I think we just have to begin to get better theologies. We have to begin to get people together and create safe spaces where they can tell their stories. And I think when we begin to do that, we'll begin to see that there'll be a lot of people who see this as a spiritual value. But I would say start with finding organizers who are doing the work and help the leaders get educated, and let's move through the process.
Thank you, Reverend Billy Honor. And just building on that, Reverend Kenyatta Chinwe has been leading Amplify's work around faith and RJ and Sister Son's work. And there is both a blog, God is Pro-Choice, and so am I, a blog that folks can contribute to and build on this conversation around the intersection of faith and reproductive justice. And we also have a really beautiful justice statement that I know, Reverend Billy Honor, you were part of this. We built with leaders of faith across religions and across issue areas to create a statement that affirmed our commitment to various social justice issues, including reproductive justice. It's really beautiful. As a member, a person of faith, or as a leader of faith, you can sign on to that and then get involved from there. So I will share that via the chat for folks that are interested. And that will bring us to our next question, which was shared in the chat. If 70% of Georgians support abortion, then what holds us back from passing proactive abortion bills, eliminating any sort of restrictions? What a wonderful question. Who would like, I see State Rep Shelley Hutchinson. Yes, please take us away.
So this is something that I did not fully realize until I got to the Capitol. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. We can't pass squat. We have so much brilliant legislation that is put together by our members that never see the light of day, and they won't ever see the light of day. I just learned recently that they have to negotiate how many Democrat bills hit the floor, and that's five a year. We put out hundreds and thousands. If you combine everything, there are thousands of bills that are created every year. We're allowed 5, and they pick which 5. And out of those 5, 1 might make it to the governor, and then he vetoes it. I have to, the best example of this is one of my colleagues worked for years on PE in early education. He passed the bill, he worked on it across the aisle, the Senate, the House, it passed, Kemp vetoed it. I had a bill last year, mental health is my career. The mental health manual is the DSM. We refer to DSM-3 in Georgia law. We're on DSM-5. DSM-3 is 88. I put out a bill that said that we were just going to recognize the most recent version of the DSM. There's no money involved. There's no controversy involved, nothing. They would not let it go because I'm on the wrong side of the aisle. If I can't get that teeny tiny DSM bill passed, there is no proactive legislation that we can introduce that's going to make it anywhere. We put together legislation so you know what we're fighting for, but we know full well is not going to go anywhere. The only thing we can do right now in this moment is get more people elected to the House because we need numbers. The heartbeat bill passed by 1 vote. The final vote was 1 vote. But they passed it because they have the numbers. And that when you see craziness and you're wondering where we are, we don't have the numbers. On big bills like the voter suppression bill and the heartbeat bill, we have all voted 99% with our caucus. We don't have the numbers to do anything proactively. We are there fighting. We fight against terrible bills because we can't do anything else. So that's why your support, the protesters and the people who support us are so very important. But just understand that we have put together so many bills that y'all would love, but they never see the light of day. We've made marijuana legal. We've banned the death penalty. We've done so much, but we can't, until we get the numbers or we get Stacey as governor, it's going to be that way. As long as they have control over every aspect of government, it will be that way.
Thank you. I do see a lot of hands up, and I know we want to talk more about this one. You brought up a lot of things, Rep. Hutchinson. One thing before we dive into the additional hands raised, 2 things. The first one is most, if not all of the organizations, most of the organizations on this call are 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organizations. So when we say we mean folks that are here for reproductive freedom and advancing that agenda. And that in some future may mean folks from across the aisle and from all parties, from multiple parties. Folks will notice that right now, it's really clear who comes out to support this issue from the state legislature. And so when they say they may talk about their party. The Democratic Party is in the minority right now. So we need to identify, this is to all of us in the movement, all of us listening, we need to identify who are our allies and our champions and make sure that our movement, our movement has the political power to make sure that representation in our state government is actually reflecting our values. And that is true regardless of party. But I realize that folks who are running and who are electeds also are speaking about their party. Just wanted to make that super explicit for us all. The other thing is, just for the sake of time, I'm going to ask, we have 4 people who want to respond to this still. So I'm going to ask each of us to try and keep it to like 30 seconds, if that's okay. Can I hear from Representative Mitchell?
Yes, I wanted to add on to what Representative Hutchinson said, to point out that there is power both in showing what legislation could be and also in the very large activist presence that lets people know when bills do not reflect the interests of local people. And specifically when we look at things like education policy, which impacts how families grow and are supported in Georgia, when people showed up, their voices were heard, things were changed. There is power in activism to be able to stop bad things going forward and to let people know that they are responsible to the people who elected them. Agreed, we have so much space that we're fighting so hard in. There are some wins.
Yep. And we'll talk too about what is possible when we are where we are. Representative Allen?
Yeah, Rula, I'll be real quick because you actually said what I wanted to say, which is, we need allies regardless of party. Representative Hutchinson brought up the best point of we lost on 481 by one vote. I can tell you Democrats don't have just a one vote minority. That means there were others on the other side of the aisle that were either shamed enough or convicted enough not to vote and take a walk. I think that one of the things that we don't focus on enough is how do we get more of those allies? So I agree that we need to elect more Democrats, but I think we need to elect more people who truly understand that abortion is healthcare and that a woman's right to choose is a fundamental right. And that should be regardless of party. So I think as we look at our efforts, it's supporting candidates. There are a lot of races in Georgia because of the way the maps are drawn where there's not a Democrat that's in the race. It's only a Republican primary. And there may be opportunities to make sure that organizations like yourself are supporting pro-abortion candidates, those that support a woman's right to choose. So I think that's very important and not to be lost.
Thank you. That's true. Regardless of who is in the race and where we are, we can always ask our candidates what they stand on and what they're not willing to stand on. Representative Wilson, your hand is up too.
Yeah, so the only thing that I'll add is, the reason why we have 70% of Georgians supporting abortion access, and yet we continue to have this all-out assault in the General Assembly is because of gerrymandering. I don't want to get into into the gerrymandering process and all of that, but I just highlight that to say, what we've been talking about this whole time is that if you want to fight for abortion access, then you have to get involved in this political process because all these other things affect the ability for us to provide healthcare to our citizens, right? And to beat back against this. And so one of the things, and I'm so glad that we're doing this today, because I think that this will help, is with all the horrible news coming down, especially from the Supreme Court right now and across the country and from the federal level. For people who aren't engaged in this every single day, like those of us at this roundtable are, hearing that when you turn on the news or when you flip to social media and you just hear everyone talking about the bad, it can be very deflating, right? And it can make you want to just disengage and focus. I'm going to focus on this small area of my life that I have more control over, where I can get some good news, right? But our challenge is to keep our friends and allies engaged in this process, because that's the only way we change it, right? Is all the ways that we've been talking about, all the big and small ways that we've been talking about on this call already. And those play out over the course of the year and throughout election cycles, and accumulate on one another. So that's the challenge as we reflect today and going forward. I think for us, the big question is, despite all the defeats, and we've still got to be pushing back against them, how do we also keep just the everyday Georgians, the 70% of Georgians who want abortion access, how do we keep them engaged in this fight and all the other little fights that impact it?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. We were also going to ask Reverend Billy Honor to just speak briefly to that piece about building political power. If 70% of Georgians support abortion, what do we do to get to the point of actually being able to have proactive efforts to unrestrict, to undo all these restrictions we already have, even under Roe versus Wade? How do we go from here?
We got to take all this fire I've been hearing all morning on this in this conversation to high opportunity voters, right? And that's how we've begun to talk about them. A lot of people like to talk about them as unlikely voters, but we call them high opportunity voters, right? There are so many people who have just checked out of the political process and were never involved. And part of what the strategy has been is how do you take the conversation to them, talk to them and help them to understand to the point, not what people are trying to take away from you, but what is the power that you have to bring about what you want to see in your life. And when you empower people through their electoral consciousness, they stand up. And that's what we have to do. We have to begin to empower people about what their vote can accomplish by talking to people who aren't traditionally talked to.
Thank you so much. That was really succinct, really helpful. I'll turn it back to you, Allison, for the next question.
Love this conversation. Thank you all so much. The next question is around oral history. So do you think that there's a place for an oral history project? Video and spoken story is a very powerful tool. And I'm going to hand this over to Sue Beth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Allison. I think that's a really great question because it brings it back to the fact that abortion is not a numbers game. It's not a political football. It's about real people's stories and real lives. And there are incredible amounts of oral history projects going on around the country, but some real-time ones that I wanted to mention are Shout Your Abortion, which is sort of a decentralized network of people sharing their abortion stories to destigmatize abortion in general and show how normal it is, how everyday often that people experience this for a variety of reasons. And there is also Melissa Madera, who is incredible and runs the Abortion Diary and is absolutely one of the most life-altering kind of things you can listen to when you hear so many different people's perspectives. And then also closer to home in Georgia, there's Lauren McIver Thompson, who's a historian at GSU, who's looking at some historical underpinnings of abortion, and I think also doing an oral history project. But I would encourage, if that is your interest, do it. You know, like there's always room to start looking back. For example, you know, there's a lot of room to look at how the idea of religious underpinnings came to be in this space, because it wasn't always the case, you know? And so some of the things that we accept now as being standard and politicized weren't always that way. So I just encourage everybody to get involved.
Thank you so much. And I also, I appreciate all the links that Allison, you're adding to the chat for this. As Kwajalein says in the chat, we can all be a safe place for folks to share their abortion stories with us. You don't have to be a historian or a journalist. It's actually really important that many people don't know this, but the truth is, as we love to say, everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. The facts show that only some people are aware that they know someone who's had an abortion. That's because not everybody feels like a safe person to tell, but that is part of the culture shifting work that we all need to be doing. I
also want to just note the importance of art also, and storytelling and shaping people's perspective on abortion and bodily autonomy. There are some beautiful projects, very art forward, that are happening that we could share in the chat. One that comes to mind is Liberated Bodies, but there are many more. So as you know of projects happening of like art inspired work, please share them so that folks can disseminate them within their networks. Are there other questions? Please, you can put them in the chat or use the Q&A tool, or if folks on the panel want to jump in and share some thoughts that come to mind from the other comments.
Actually, if you don't mind, I would love to jump in with some of the other questions that we had from the organizers. Okay. So we wanted to just first bring it to Kwajalein and to Dr. Hale Storks as well. We've talked about the unknown of this summer. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the Supreme Court decision on Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. How are you as a clinic and you as a provider, how are y'all preparing for the unknown of this summer? And going back to that radical optimism, what role does that play?
So it is important for us to be aware of all of the risks that are in front of us. So, you know, as I mentioned in my remarks, Feminist Center has been around for 46 years, and we don't only provide abortion care. We also do advocacy, outreach, education, leadership development, gynecological care, trans health care, preventative services. But we certainly know that abortion services, because of how needed and necessary they are, make up the lion's share of the energy and resources and work that we do. And so should the political landscape change dramatically, our organization will have to fundamentally change to survive. So we're doing scenario planning. We're trying to figure out like what kinds of adjustments might be necessary if we were to only offer wellness and preventative services. What ways could we expand into other areas of reproductive health care? What ways could we support pregnancy, birth, and parenting differently if we did not have to spend so much of our energy and resources and staffing and capacity on trying to protect and provide abortion services? Because we also know that it's critical for clinics, independent clinics, and Planned Parenthood clinics across the country to survive this moment, because abortion is going to come back around again. We will not be obsolete. We will not become unnecessary. We will go through this moment. We will, hunker down in the ways that we can, and then we will be here and ready when the time comes for providing abortion services again. The only other thing I'll mention before I pass it back to Dr. Hale-Storks is that what I encourage folks to do right now is, if you are not necessarily in need of abortion services, or somebody in your life is not currently in a situation where they need abortion care, but you know folks who need birth control or need STI testing or need annual exams, vaccinations, that looking to independent clinics that are providing comprehensive care across the reproductive justice framework are places where you can go for ongoing, sustained services. And that helps us to survive. Those are the things that help us maintain and be around in 2040 and 2050 and 2075. That's what I would encourage folks that they could do right now. In addition to being able to fund abortions by supporting abortion funds like ARC Southeast, who are helping people navigate if they need to leave the state of Georgia to get care, making sure that those organizations that are the lifeblood, that are the arteries that connect people to care, have everything that they need to make sure that there is uninterrupted access, even if it is full of obstacles, and uninterrupted access to abortion services for the people who need them.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Dr. Hale-Storks, we also have another question for you, but is there anything you want to add on this one?
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback on what Quadrilyn said about, I think it is a heavy thing that we constantly are thinking about as providers. But I think our biggest thing is also finding out innovative ways to help our patients navigate if we have to coordinate services, if they are no longer able to get care in Georgia. I think that's something that we're constantly thinking about with our neighboring states, and if we will have to help coordinate and what that looks like in terms of transportation, in terms of cost, in terms of providers that are in Atlanta or in Georgia, and actually broadening where we practice to be able to still provide care. So that's something that we've definitely been considering. We also want to promote, preventative care and contraceptive care and women's wellness exams, all of those preventative health visits, so that people can have access to that. I also think just reassuring the patients that we do see and just showing up every day now and providing care and reassuring our patients that we are here to help them and provide what they need.
Thank you. And before I realize we are coming very close to 11:30, we are going to take a few more minutes for a few more critical questions. One of them is, well, first an announcement. Rebecca Mitchell, Representative Mitchell said that there's a resolution coming to commemorate the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. And not just that, but to commit to uphold and affirm reproductive freedom. We have been really, really excited and grateful to work on that. The advocates here at this table, ARC Southeast and Feminist Women's Health Center are in fact part of the campaign for a Reproductive Freedom Act. We know that a Reproductive Freedom Act is not within reach in this year, in this session, but with building political power, it may be a reality in our future. So we're talking about a resolution right now. We would love for the representatives on this call, it's a House resolution, and we would love for you all to sign on. We would, several of you already have, and that is really exciting. We would love for senators to consider a Senate resolution. Talk to us if you have any thoughts about doing that. And certainly reach out to us if you want to add your name. And it is a new effort, but we've been working on this campaign for some time. So Dr. Hailstorks, I'm going to ask you, because you're on the Reproductive Justice Commission, which is a city body in Atlanta. The city of Atlanta just unanimously passed a resolution this past week that has a similar intent that says, well, I'll let you tell us, what does it say? And if it's a resolution, what does that accomplish? Why do we have those?
Yes, so we are very excited about the resolution. I think that it affirms the commitment to continue to develop innovative steps to protect reproductive health care, including abortion access. And we are excited about the momentum that it has, and we are hopeful that it can lead to other policy change.
Exactly. That was really succinct. So this is a chance for all of us to say where we stand, as Rep. Hutchinson said. And as Representative Allen said, it shouldn't even be something that it shouldn't be controversial, right? A fundamental right is a fundamental right. So I am briefly in the next couple of minutes going to have questions for Agbo and for Shanti that we really wanted to ask you. Agbo, you have a little bit of data on actually, this is a question we'll pass it to Suba as well. But Agbo, healthcare providers are limited in so many parts of the state, as many of our representatives know. Abortion access is even more limited. Only 5% of counties have an abortion provider. 95% do not. And even within those counties, it can be hard because of all the other economic justice and access and geographic issues to just access the provider that's in your county. So you've been working, Agbo, on the issue of anti-abortion centers, also known as crisis pregnancy centers or pregnancy resource centers, which have had multiple actions by the state legislature to give them money with the idea that they support people who are pregnant. Can you briefly talk about why that's not a solution to the lack of abortion access?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rula. So anti-abortion centers, or crisis pregnancy centers, as Rula stated, have been funded by the Georgia legislature since 2016, when they passed the Positive Alternatives to Pregnancy and Parenting Act. That was a bill to allot state funds to anti-abortion centers. The issue with anti-abortion centers, however, is that they are not actual medical clinics. Their main purpose is to convince pregnant people who are just seeking resources, who are just seeking support, to not have an abortion. These organizations often do this by lying to people, by shaming them, by honestly putting them in a state where they do not know how to seek an abortion. So right now we are running a campaign to defund crisis pregnancy centers, as well as demystify them. Anti-abortion centers operate by deception. A lot of people don't know what they are, and that's how they are able to flourish like they do. Currently, Georgia has about almost 100, like 91 anti-abortion centers to our 26 abortion clinics, or clinics that provide abortions. So we recognize that anti-abortion centers are not the solution to receiving health care. They're not the solution to people who are experiencing unwanted pregnancies. So we are running this campaign to prevent Georgia from further funding anti-abortion centers and allot those funds to organizations that actually help people, that actually use evidence-based services and care to assist pregnant people who are just seeking services.
Thank you, Agbo, so much. A couple of our panelists are dropping off to go to the other Zoom room with journalists. And it's really important that we finish with hearing from Shanti Moore. Can you talk to us about Sister Song, the reproductive justice pillars, and your perspective as a birth worker on all of this?
Sure. So in terms of the reproductive justice framework, and thank you, Oriaku, for mentioning this earlier, but just going back to those tenets that everyone has the right to have a child if they choose, everyone has the right to not have children, everyone has the right to raise their children in safe and sustainable environments, and everyone has the right to bodily autonomy, and how that connects to birth justice. Basically, birth justice is just another rung of reproductive justice. And it's about making sure that birthing people and people of reproductive age have all of the resources that they need. It's about advocating for those who want to become parents to make sure that they are able to birth in healthy spaces and safe spaces. And it's also, again, about making sure that those who choose not to have the same type of support.
Thank you. That's really helpful to hear. A thread that I have heard from comments from Billy and from Shanti, who are part of this movement, not because abortion access and rights are necessarily the center of your work, but because, first of all, it is part of a justice agenda. And secondly, because as Billy said, people of faith support abortion access and are pro-choice because of their faith, often not in spite of it. And Shanti, as you said, when we do pregnancy care, when we support people who are pregnant, because of that, whatever their pregnancy outcomes or choices are, we often see that, birth workers end up being supporters as well of the full spectrum of reproductive health decisions. It's really important that we continue to see where our allies, and not just our allies, but our fellow impacted folks are. So I'm going to close it up. We have to go. We have had some really wonderful questions, including ones we haven't had a chance to answer. So I am going to make sure that we do our best to answer them in follow-up. And Gloria, can I have you close us out, please?
Yes, just want to be sure that everybody understands that we are going to start in about a few minutes at noon with a deep dive into some of the issues that we've already talked about, but it's going to be a conversation with Robin Marty. We certainly hope that all of the panelists will stay with us and participate in that, give her a chance to talk about the book, and also give you an opportunity to ask some of those questions. So you can leave your Zoom up, is my understanding. You don't have to call back in. You can just leave it up, turn off your video if you'd like, and we'll start back at noon. I just want to thank everyone for being here today. This has been amazing, absolutely amazing, way beyond what I thought it was going to be, because we had a lot of different voices, a lot of different input, great information. And I really especially appreciate that I feel more of a sense of celebration now than I did when I started. There is hope. There's certainly an opportunity for us to do more work. And we're going to do that. I feel recommitted to making this happen for us. So I hope I will see everybody back at noon. in this same space.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you at noon. We're going on a short music break, and have a great day, y'all. Hey, I see some waves in the background. Take care. Thank you all.
Okay, so we'll see Robin back here at noon.
Gloria, thanks so much. I'm going to kind of put the screen off and play some music if I'm able to.
Should
Absolutely.
I try pausing the recording? It's not
That-
something I'm familiar with, but hopefully it will work. Okay, I'm going to pause it.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Gloria. Hey, thanks. And hello again, everybody. The way we're going to do this is, I believe, hold on one second. Yes. Okay. Allison, can you start from the top of the list, and I'll go from the bottom of the list. We're going to make all of the participants into panelists. You'll have panelist status just like the rest of us so that we can all be in a discussion room together. We are going to then mute you, and you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you so that you can ask your question. This is just to make sure that there's not tons of crosstalk and that everybody has a chance to participate. So we'll you'll see a invitation to become a panelist, and if you're here to be part of the discussion, then go ahead and accept that invitation.
I'm having an issue getting the participant list to pop up on my end, Rula, so you may just have to do all of them.
Okay, no worries. I think I can. In the meantime, Gloria, can I invite you to kick us off with a reintroduction of Robin?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you to everyone who's going to be joining us for this. We just really have an opportunity to learn some things that we might not have thought about before, because in my estimation, Robin has written sort of the ultimate resource book. And I have to read the title of this new handbook so I get it right. It's the new handbook for a post-Roe America, the complete guide to abortion legality, access, and practical support. And, you know, the title says it all. Again, that's a lot. And Robin, how many pages are in the book?
Oh, like 300-ish, this version, I think.
And you've written previous books about abortion access, right?
Yes.
What's different about this one?
So this one is actually a practical guide, and it came out of actually a Twitter conversation, because the day that Robert Kennedy announced, God, that's not his name. Just Anthony Kennedy. There we go. Sorry, it's still an hour behind for me. The day that Anthony Kennedy announced that he was retiring from the Supreme Court, as soon as that announcement came out, if you were on social media, you would have seen Twitter explode with two things. The first thing is everybody said, oh no, Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned. I need to give money to Planned Parenthood. And the second thing they said was, I'm going to stockpile a whole bunch of emergency contraception. And while that's really, like, I'm glad people were involved and realized that they needed to take action, those are two really bad actions for just everyday people to take. Well, not bad, but if you really want to make sure that abortion is protected in states that are going to be the most vulnerable, Planned Parenthood is not always the best place to send your money. For most of the states that have just one or just less than 4 clinics, you will not see a Planned Parenthood there. You will see that those states have abortion clinics that are done independent providers. So if you give money to Planned Parenthood, especially Planned Parenthood at a national level, you can't guarantee that the funding that you are giving is actually going to get to the clinics where access is the most precarious. having emergency contraception on hand is always an amazing idea, and I highly recommend that every person do it. Stockpiling emergency contraception is an awful idea if you are not an activist already involved in a group that is doing this sort of work. It makes people are under the assumption that activists did not exist that are already working on this, and obviously, out in Georgia, we already know that there are lots of organizations that are handing out emergency contraception to people. What you do when you decide that you are going to stockpile emergency contraception is you take it off of the shelves and make it unavailable for people who actually do have an emergency and need to show up and get that medication. So if you are just a person who has a trunk full of emergency contraception, how are people going to find you? Are they just going to wander up and down the street saying, hey, you got any emergency contraception on you? So this Twitter conversation became this list of what people should and shouldn't do when preparing for the possible end of legal abortion in much of the United States. That turned into a Huffington Post article telling people, don't start creating things. These actions already exist. These organizations already exist. Every time you see an abortion ban go into effect or even just proposed, you hear people say, okay, we need to start organizations to get people from one state to the next state so that they can get abortion. No, that already exists. You see things like, oh, we're going to be the Janes. We're going to do abortions for people. But they aren't actually people who are medically trained or like legally safe, or even mainly they're just well-intentioned people who don't understand that there is a multi-decade history of organizations that have already been doing this work. It's, to be frank, the well-intentioned white lady. So what this book was essentially a way to address the pussy hatters. It was a way to tell them, hey, you don't need to create things. You don't need to go out and do things. There is already a system there, and your job is to find the place where you can fit into it for the best. So the first version of the book came out in 2019. And right before the Georgia ban hit, the Alabama total ban hit, right before all of these bans hit. But I quickly realized that the first version of the book was not the right version of the book, because once COVID occurred, we saw in a very clear flash what abortion access is going to look like once Roe v. Wade is completely gone. Because obviously, governors who now you look at it and they're like, we don't believe in mask mandates, we don't believe in vaccine mandates. But at the time, they were more than willing to use COVID initially in order to shut down all abortion clinics and say that they were not essential healthcare. So you saw Texas disappear and got to see for 2 months what it would look like if there was no abortion access in Texas. You saw Louisiana disappear. You saw a lot of these Gulf Coast states not have abortion access. And there was a very brief period where Alabama, of all places, was one of the few places in the Gulf Coast where you could actually access an abortion because their clinics were the only ones open. That was a point in which it became very clear that eventually abortion may not be considered a constitutional right in the United States. However, it does not matter whether the Constitution says that you should have a right to an abortion, because bodily autonomy will always be a human right, and that supersedes anything else that the courts decide. If you truly believe that, if you believe that every person who is capable of becoming pregnant should get to decide for themselves whether they're going to continue a pregnancy to term, then we have to find a way to work together and to begin to organize to make sure that every person keeps that right, regardless of what the consequences may be. And so the second version of this book took more look at how people can protect themselves online, how people can access their own abortions, either through medication abortion, through finding abortion providers that may not be on the radar, or even through herbal abortion, which, while it is not the most effective means by any way, shape, or form, it's information that is out there. And for some people, that is going to be the only thing that they can access. If they are going to be able to access it, they need to be able to do that in a safe way, knowing that there are going to be other approaches they need to take if that doesn't work. So the second version of the handbook turned into a guide that also came with a bunch of lists at the end of each section. So this is a checklist for how to be prepared if you're going to do your own abortion at home, whether it be pills that were given to you from a clinic, pills that were given to you from the internet. As long as you have verified pills, which in many cases is very easy to do these days, these are the steps that you should take to do an abortion at home. If you are going to seek out abortion help online, how do you stay both legally secure, so making sure that you are not providing any information that will be traced back to you, but also how do you stay secure in a way to be sure that your social media posts aren't showing up to people who know you? There are many people who will go into Facebook groups or Reddit places where they are seeking abortion information and find out that there are anti-abortion people in there who then go back and look at their profiles and say, oh, look, this person is married to this person, and will direct message that person and say, did you know that your wife is trying to access an abortion and she's trying to do it in secret? Those are the sort of things
they'll sue you.
Yeah, those are the sort of things that are happening. And that's something that's even far more important now that we have the Texas law that says that anybody who has helped somebody obtain an abortion can be sued. When we watched 2019 occur and all of the bans and restrictions that came into place, we saw a myriad of extraordinarily extreme, obviously unconstitutional bans that existed because at this point we had legislatures who no longer cared about the Constitution. And so we understood that that's what was going on. Now we are seeing in these same states a new set of ultra non-constitutional laws that are going not just at abortion, but are going at abortion information, are going at different ways of prosecuting. Mississippi introduced a bill earlier this week, and they actually had introduced it last year, but it never made it to a vote, that says that it is a felony to provide information about obtaining an abortion. Essentially, Mississippi is reintroducing what was previously known as the Comstock Law. So the Comstock Law, way before Roe, way before all of this, was a law that said that talking about birth control, talking about abortion, advertisements for things that might cause a person to terminate a pregnancy, anything that was considered in any way, shape, or form lewd was a arrestable offense. That's where we got things like the court case of Griswold v. Connecticut. Comstock law did not ever actually get rescinded. It just kind of disappeared because society evolved. But officially, it's really still out there and unenforced. And now we're seeing states like Mississippi that says giving people information about where to obtain a medication abortion is a felony. Giving a person information about how to perform their own abortion is a felony. The World Health Organization's rules on how to provide an abortion, that would be considered a felony if you were to give that to another person in Mississippi. This is where we're at right now. And we know that these are things that cannot be enforced, but we also know that we have enough states that have overzealous prosecutors, racist judicial systems, racist hospital systems, racist police systems. And so we know that all of these different elements are going to come to play as prosecutors, doctors, every person decides based on whomever comes into their hospital, seeks out care in any way, shape, or form, are then subject to potentially being turned into the police. And so this new version of the book is a way to address all of that and try to minimize both the risks for a person who would be obtaining abortion outside of a clinic setting, but also for the people who want to do something to support people who are going to be doing this as well.
And I know there are lots of questions people have for you, and I'm going to let them ask some of those questions and then see if we can get some more of the details of the book and the resources. Who's got a question?
It's scary, trust me. Everything is scary right now. So if you want to ask scary questions, I'm here for it.
Well, I have a question, which is just what are the significant changes you made between the handbook and the new handbook between 2019 and now?
So the most significant part is the fact that we have checklists and to-do lists at the end of each book. But when I did the original version, the book was half a directory of where a person could go to access resources. So if you wanted to get involved in your state, they had a list of all of the abortion funds, all of the reproductive rights groups, all of the reproductive justice groups, all of the practical support groups, so that you could tie into any person or tie into any organization in your state and work locally. I decided that that was actually unnecessary when we did the second version, and that is now all up on a website that's postrowhandbook.com. So a person can go in and access that information. It does not need to be in a paper copy. So that new set of room is what became the expanded version, which now has internet safety, now has information on how to best protest. So for instance, how to protest for abortion rights and access, but also how to protest against anti-abortion protesters. So information about the best ways that you can go about, say, trying to deal with anti-abortion people who show up at clinics. Like, don't do this at a clinic, but do feel free to go and follow them to other events and do stuff there. There is a very extensive section on herbal abortion options, simply because in a lot of ways, gatekeeping that information seemed inherently paternalistic, and also mildly racist, because herbal abortion is something that communities of color have been using for centuries. And so stating that this is something that is unsafe and that information should not be out there was harmful, in my opinion. There's a big section about how you get pregnant, because it turns out that a lot of people don't actually understand how their cycle works and how people get pregnant to begin with. So we will see a lot of people who don't understand how gestational age works, or what a last menstrual period is, or even like the period that happens between getting pregnant and actually being able to show a pregnancy test. So there's a lot of very simple, basic information in there that was not in the last version. And also there is a section that is all about anti-abortion myths and how a person can combat anti-abortion myths and facts that they can provide, especially in letters to the editor, different news outlets, other ways that you can combat this information that is coming from the right in order to try and take away the right to choose.
Thanks so much for answering that. I see, Kim, you have your hand up. Go ahead. I think I can ask you to unmute, and then you unmute and you ask your question.
Hi, is that me, Kim?
Kim Bick Maurice?
Yes, great.
Maurice.
Yeah,
okay, yes.
Maurice, yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if you have anything in there on menstrual extraction.
I do, actually. And it's funny that you asked that, because menstrual extraction is actually why this book exists.
Yes.
Originally, I couldn't get it published. I had an agent that reached out to me and told me to write a book. And then once she saw the proposal for the book, said there's no way that it would ever sell. So I can't actually take this book. And so I went to Twitter and said, I was told that abortion books don't sell. Would you buy a book that was on this? And there was a historian who reached out to me, and he said, I think that my publisher would be very interested in this, and introduced me to my current publisher, who adored it because they had published A Woman's Book of Choices by Carol Downer and Rebecca Chalker. And they were the first ones to release information on how to do menstrual extraction. And so that's actually in the book now, and with permission from them and the publisher. So there's information on how to do menstrual extraction. There is information on how to do MVA as well, with the caveat, obviously, that this is something that really should be performed by people who have been trained on this. There's information on how to access PIA training. There is information on all sorts of things that essentially I feel is best to compile in one place, not because I encourage people to do it, mind you, but because I know that people will be looking for this information. And as such, it makes sense for them to have the information that will be the safest for them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you
Some
for
other
that
questions
question.
for Marty? Did you see someone else, Rula?
I didn't. I said, thanks for that question. And I saw that in the chat, Allison helped specify if you heard the acronym MVA,
Oh, yes,
that stands for
sorry.
manual vacuum aspiration, which is a safe abortion procedure. Surgical abortion is one term for it, but I often try to avoid the use of the word surgical because people usually think of scalpels when they think of surgery, and there's no cutting involved in that. It's actually an aspiration, a vacuum aspiration.
And that's actually one of the things that is in the getting rid of anti-abortion myths. It is amazing. And honestly, it blew me away once I started working in a clinic, how many patients came in thinking they were about to be cut open. So many patients come in believing that when they're being told that they're going to be having an abortion procedure, that they are literally going to be cut with a scalpel, that the baby will be taken out, and that they will be sewn back shut. And they still want to do it. That is the thing that makes it so clear how much this is a point of desperation for many pregnant people, because they hear the things about, okay, abortion is extraordinarily dangerous. Okay, you're going to have your uterus ripped open. They hear all of these things, and they would still rather go through any of that than have to remain pregnant. And so I find that trying to make sure that people understand what is actually in an abortion is one of the most important things that people who are trying to keep abortion accessible can do. As such, I have a Flickr page that is full of public use photos that are of tools that are used in an abortion. So you can see the rod dilators, you can see the forceps, you can see MVA kit. So all of these things, it's all about destigmatizing abortion tools so that people can see there isn't a scalpel in there. There isn't a knife. There aren't all of these like crinkly things with pointy edges on them. In fact, pointy edges is the worst thing that you can stick in somebody's uterus right now. So making people understand that. Yesterday, we had a discussion about that on Twitter, and people said, you know, I get scraped harder at a dentist because dentists use little picks and pull stuff out, and abortion providers do not.
And you've mentioned Twitter several times. If you're not following Marty on Twitter, please do.
Oh, yes, I am Robin Marty on Twitter. It's pretty simple. Also on Facebook.
Yes, and it's the conversations that get started are always very, very interesting. It is exactly where I found her. Had no idea about the book. I was following a conversation and said, wait a minute, this woman, we need to hear from her. So, and also one of the things that you mentioned in the previous program was that you're from Minnesota. So am I.
I am.
And I can imagine, because I moved from Minnesota to Georgia and you moved from Minnesota to Alabama, that was a lot of cultural shock. And would you just take a minute and tell people why you moved from Minnesota to Alabama?
Sure. So I got involved with reproductive justice in Alabama through the Yellowhammer Fund, which is a reproductive abortion fund out in Alabama that serves Alabama and Mississippi primarily, and the Florida Panhandle. They hired me as their communications director. And then in 2020, in order to keep Tuscaloosa Abortion Clinic Alabama has 3 abortion clinics. In order to keep the Tuscaloosa clinic open when the owner and the doctor wanted to retire, Yellowhammer Fund purchased all of the stock of the clinic and purchased the building, and then had me essentially find a new doctor to come down and provide there. And I coerced Dr. Leah Torres, who is also on Twitter and very loud, to give up her practice in New Mexico and come to Alabama and be an Alabama abortion provider. And one of the things that I used to convince her to come down is I promised her that if she came down, I would come down. And so almost exactly a year ago, I moved down here with my 3 children and my husband. And ever since then, I have been helping first to do finances. And now I am the operations director of the abortion clinic here in Tuscaloosa. And it has an eye-opening experience, both from the South and from an abortion viewpoint. I think the most shocking thing to me culturally is the way that the state has no regard for the health of any of the people that live within its borders. Alabama is one of the 12 states, much like Georgia, that has not expanded Medicaid. Alabama currently used a large amount of their COVID funding from the federal government in order to build a new prison, rather than actually do anything to help people access healthcare. The people who come into our clinic for services are people who primarily are not able to access birth control locally from the one healthcare center that offers birth control. They will often end up giving birth and be denied the ability to get birth control in the hospital, or they will be told that their only option is to be sterilized. So we see in our clinic that reproductive health care is used as a tool to essentially deny bodily autonomy to people. So we will have patients who come in and we hear repeatedly, I tried to get an IUD from my doctor after I gave birth, and my doctor said, you have 3 children, you don't need an IUD, you need to have your tubes tied. And if they say, well, I'm 28, I don't know if I want more children later, I just don't want to have one right now, then the doctor will refuse an IUD because that patient is not following their instructions as to simply being done having children. This is the sort of coercion that we hear constantly. And so it is why we both to continue offering abortion care, but also we have been working ever since we took over the clinic to be able to actually provide birth control and other sexual health care in our building itself. It has been a very long and arduous process because, unsurprisingly, the state of Alabama has no interest in us doing that because we are in fact an abortion provider, and they are worried that if we have another outlet that it would keep us open. And so we have now been in a 16-month fight with the state of Alabama over trying to get approved for Medicaid, including our most recent version where our clinic was approved as a Medicaid provider, but our doctor was not. So officially, we could see Medicaid patients, we just can't provide them any services. So this is the sort of thing that we've dealt with ever since we moved to Alabama. And it's really important in a lot of ways to understand that we know, especially during the Trump administration, that the GOP, when it has control over all the arms of government, tries to eliminate as much freedom in general, but also reproductive freedom for people of color and marginalized communities. We know that when they don't have control of the federal government, they will do it on a state-based level as much as they can. We do know that when they don't have the access on a state level, then they will drill down to the cities. So we can do the same thing. We know that this is a state where at this point, as they said in the last panel, the entirety of the state level government is run by Republicans, and they are blocking bills. They are making sure that these sort of things are not being put up for a vote. But as Rula had mentioned earlier today, Atlanta has introduced a reproductive freedom resolution And these are works that we can then do in very progressive strongholds that will be able to provide some sort of advancement, even if there isn't anything that can be done at a state level. And one of the examples that I like to give is in Austin, Texas, where the activists in Austin, Texas were able to pass a resolution that essentially provided practical support money for people who needed to obtain abortions. They can't provide money for abortions because that would be illegal in the state. But what they can do is provide people who are going to access abortion with money so that they can travel to another state, or so that they can have somebody come in and watch their children so that they can go in for an abortion. These were all things that could happen, obviously, before the Texas ban went into effect in September. But we can find ways to work at a local level in order to move things forward, whether that be working at the city council, whether that be, in many ways, the zoning board can be one of the most important places that a person can run for office or try to get involved, because we see so many clinics that are closed because somebody passes a resolution that says you have to have X amount of parking spaces, or somebody changes the zoning on an area. These are things that are very small incremental steps that can be taken by any activist, but by doing them, you can protect abortion access clinic by clinic, if that's really what it comes down to.
We have about a minute left. Questions?
I actually wanted to, Robin, what you just said is a really great segue for Amplify to briefly talk about if anybody's interested in those local involvement, in involvement in those local campaigns and local efforts to find what is the unused mechanism that's going to protect access in our city or county. That is exactly where Amplify started. Our state legislative, state policy work is actually kind of our newer arm of work, and we would love to have you join us for more like brainstorming around innovative ways, whether you're in Atlanta or DeKalb County, which are the two places where we currently have campaigns rolling, as well as a campaign we're supporting in Athens, Clark County, or you are somewhere else and you want to talk about what it would look like in your area, please get in touch. And I'll let Allison put a link if there is one for us. The other thing I want to be.
I just want to note the resolution we just passed at the Atlanta level. We are happy to share that language with you. We are happy to help you modify it for your local city or county. We know the opposition has their playbooks, they have their templates, they plug and go, and that's how these horrible laws are replicated across states and across cities, and we should be doing similar things for our, beautiful proactive resolutions and legislation. So we are happy to support you to take this to new places.
Yeah. Since we're at 12:31, I just wanted to make sure that if anybody has to drop off, that you have the link again for where to buy the book. Our local feminist independent bookseller, Karis Books and Karis Circle, are our virtual co-sponsor and bookseller for this. And so if you purchase from them, you'll be supporting an independent bookseller, which is also great. You'll be supporting the Georgia economy, which is great, but also this like really historic, I believe it's the oldest continually operating feminist bookstore in the country. Thank you so much to Robin. Yeah, we can take a few more questions if there are questions. Gloria?
I do want to let people know, in case people do start dropping off, that I'm always available by email for questions. It's just robinmarty@gmail.com.
Okay. So, were there any other questions in the chat?
Not that I saw.
All right, if anybody's got a question, take advantage of this opportunity.
Some comments I saw too that I can lift up.
Okay.
Aaliyah Browning says, it's amazing to me that we don't talk about abortion as a positive social and public good more often. I think we'd all agree with that.
Yeah.
Sharon Wood said, at the local level, we also elect DAs, district attorneys, and solicitors and judges who can affect how anti-abortion legislation might be enforced. And I would add to that cities can also direct their police departments to take their hands off reproductive health enforcement.
Following that line, I was doing a event with Liz Winstead about March for Life yesterday. And one of the things that they asked was like, what are the most devastating anti-abortion groups? But it reminded me that when it comes to the most important groups for protecting reproductive rights, I cannot be a bigger fan of If, When, How, which I think is going to be the vanguard of where we end up with this post-Roe America. If, When, How is training lawyers who support abortion rights, but also right now they have a really innovative program where they have a bond fund essentially, so that if people have been arrested or are accused in any way, shape, or form of doing something that might have harmed their pregnancy, whether it be suspected of self-managing an abortion. Oftentimes we find out that people will miscarry and for other reasons, and we will see doctors or police who are convinced that they did try to do their own miscarriage. This is a resource that people can use in order to access lawyers, in order to access bail funds. This is going to be imperative because when abortion is illegal in states, we are going to see a very biased, obviously, enforcement of that. And it is going to be a enforcement that is going to especially hit marginalized communities and communities of color. But it's also going to be like that because we are talking about states that do not have access to preventative health care in general. And that means there is no access to prenatal care. There is no access to health care that makes sure a person is healthy before they get pregnant. And so the same people who are most likely to be accused of having managed their own miscarriage are going to be the people who are most likely to be experiencing miscarriages in general because of poor health outcomes. We need to make sure that those people are protected in any way we can. And whether that be legal funds, whether that be making sure that there are people in police, in hospitals, in district attorneys' offices who are going to not try to enforce things or turn down investigating things, that is going to be huge. And it's also something that the right understands is going to be huge. And so they are already looking at ways to combat that, which alarms me. I found out earlier this week that Wisconsin is introducing a law that says that if the attorney general, because right now the attorney general is a Democrat, if an attorney general in Wisconsin chooses not to enforce an abortion ban if Roe v. Wade is overturned, then eventually a attorney general that comes in later can go back and retroactively enforce it. So essentially what they're saying is that we believe that the Wisconsin governor, who is currently a Democrat, is going to get elected again. We also believe Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned and Wisconsin has a trigger ban. So then if they are able to get a Republican elected as governor in, say, 5 years, and that ban has been enacted for 3 years, that new Republican governor with a new Republican attorney general could go back and start to prosecute any abortion provider who gave abortions during that period in which it was not being enforced. And it's a way of terrifying people out of providing care. And it's horrifying. And every time I think that there is no worse bill or there's always a hole that they will plug. And so we have to be just as diligent in making sure that we can find our own ways around them as well.
Undermine and overcome. Absolutely.
Thank you. We do have one more question, a person with their hand raised, and I think we'll close it out after that. Is that okay, Gloria?
Yes.
All right, Aliza, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, I was just wondering what kind of informed your perspective in recognizing what I think you referred to as sort of racist sentiment in the first version of your book to the second version of your book. And I'm curious as to what strategies you kind of employed to ensure that the second book was inclusive and didn't hold those same sentiments.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the changes in my perspective came both from the feedback of activists on the ground, but also the fact that my first book was written while I was still in Minnesota. And the second version was written when I had not moved to the South yet, but I had become far more involved with the South and with activism in the South and with my work in Alabama and the Yellowhammer Fund. The feedback and the activism that is already occurring, this is just another example of why it is so important for people to tie into and begin working with the groups that already exist rather than starting things on their own. I was lucky because I had a chance to address all of these things and be able to actually readjust a lot of the language, my viewpoints, the things that did and did not get involved. But I also, through the second version, reached out to a lot more activists of color and made sure that I got their input and feedback, and like they read through things. There's a whole section that was added to the second version that is about, there's a checklist of how to make sure that your activism is not basically supporting white supremacy. And that was directly done with the assistance and input of a number of Black and brown activists who talked to me about the ways that white people will come into organizing things and then take over the organization, and then tokenize and all of these other things. So there's a checklist to make sure that if you are working with an organization that says that they're a reproductive justice organization, are there Black people in leadership? That's a pretty necessary component for calling yourself a reproductive justice organization. So these are the kind of check-ins that a person needs to do, because it's not just about using your white privilege in order to be able to do things like obtain medication abortion for somebody and get it to them, or be able to get arrested over certain actions. Obviously, these are things that myself as a white middle-class woman can do in ways that other people cannot, but it's also recognizing what leadership needs to occur and needs to happen, and where a white person's role is in all of this when we are the ones who have created this.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for all of that information. I know you could go on for at least another hour, Robin, but I'm going to encourage everybody to get the book. And in the future, we will definitely be inviting you back. I also encourage everyone to follow her on Twitter and Facebook. And also
just to address Elisa's question, they did receive credit in the book, and also for the people who were involved in that chapter, they were all paid for their work on the book as well, for their sensitivity readings and all of the other actions that went into it.
Evolution. It's a good thing. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Did you have some last remarks you wanted to give, Lula?
Thank you for the opportunity. Just wanted to answer a question in the chat. Yes, we will send an email to all people who registered for the Zoom with the link to buy the book, and a recap, hopefully a link to the recording, and how you can get in touch with the organizations and panelists from today. Thank you so much. Robin, thank you for being with us. Gloria, thank you for organizing this book talk and this collaboration.
It's been wonderful. Good day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.